Okay, well, welcome everyone to Greenheart Travel's monthly webinar. So normally once a month we go over a different topic that relates to study abroad, in the study abroad experience or working abroad. But today we have a very special edition, and actually it's not only our monthly webinar, we have a second monthly webinar because we have a very special guest in the office in Chicago with us today. Her name is Anastasia.
Hello.
Hello, and she is going to tell us all about her gap year in Austria. So, Anastasia, do you want to introduce yourself quickly to the audience?
Yeah, sure. So, hi, I'm Anastasia Kalish. I went abroad from September of 2016 till July of 2017 with Greenheart Travel. I am currently a college student at the College of DuPage, and I am studying German there along with other subjects, and I am currently an intern at Greenheart Travel.
Yeah, thank you so much, Anastasia. We're really excited to have you here and to answer all these questions. So I'll just remind everyone that this is a general Q&A. Any questions that you have about study abroad, you're welcome to ask. You can ask out loud, or if you prefer, you can write your question in the chat box. Either one is great, but I will say that if there's any very program-specific information, you can email me directly. But if you have questions in general about what it's like to be a student abroad, what Anastasia's social life, school life, home life was like, this is the time to ask those questions. So, does anybody have a question they want to start with? If not, people wrote in questions they couldn't make it today, but I have some questions saved. So, I'll give you a second to either say, hey, I have a question, or write in the chat box. Otherwise, I'll get started with the questions that were sent in. So, I'll give you 5 seconds. Okay, time's up. Okay, Anastasia. Okay, so we had someone write in. They're interested in studying abroad in Germany, but this person didn't have any German language skills. Mm-hmm. So you studied abroad in Austria, which also speaks Germany, right,
Yeah.
Anastasia? So this person asked, how long did it take you to learn German? Because can you tell us a little bit about your language level before you left and how long it took you to learn?
So I had just about 0 German before I left. I took a year of German at Oak Park River Forest High School, where I graduated from in 2016. But obviously, learning language skills through only 40 minutes a day isn't really anything compared to being constantly surrounded by the language. Mm-hmm. I am always learning. I'm not done learning German, and I probably will never be done learning German, just like the same way I'll never be done learning English, and English is my native language. There's always new things to learn, and new idioms, and new slang, and it takes a lot of time, but as long as you put in the effort and you show everyone there in your host country that you're willing to learn, and you're willing to mess up, but learn from your mistakes, that's all that's appreciated.
Yeah, that's awesome. So when people ask you, I mean, this is a really common question. People say, I want to go abroad to be fluent, or I want to go abroad to learn German. Like, how do you tell them how much you learned? Like, how do you quantify it?
It's an interesting question. I definitely get that a lot. Like, people are like, oh, so you're, like, fluent, right? And I'm like, no, I'm not fluent. It was a year. A year is, like, that much out of, like, a whole lifespan. It's nothing. You know what I mean? I'd like to hope my German's decent, but it's probably in reality like the same level as like a 5-year-old child. Mm-hmm. That's just how it happens. It takes a lot of time, and learning a second language, it's like learning a second or third or fourth language, it's like having a second full-time job you're not paid for. It's, it's very much so you have to be determined. It just doesn't come to you. I mean, a little bit comes to you, but the main part is you have to be your top cheerleader.
Love that. Thank you so much for answering that question. So if anybody else, again, I'm going to encourage you to speak up or write your questions in the chat box. We'll answer them as they come. In the meantime, we did have another question, and this is probably the question on literally everyone's mind. Everybody knows that when you're about to study abroad, you're going to live with another family. Yeah? Oh, did we have a question from the audience?
We're doing an interview with my daughter, traveling abroad.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Was that a question? Yeah, okay, well, ask in the chat box as I'm speaking in that way, and then you can ask out loud again. So, but everybody else's questions, always, people ask, number one, what's it like to live with a host family? And someone wrote that question in. So could you tell us, Anastasia, what was it like for you to live with your host family?
It's definitely a gamble. Like, I have had a ton of friends who have either had really great host families or not so great host families, and I myself also had, both experiences. I had, in the beginning, a not so good host family, and then I moved, and I'm, like, really good friends with my second host family. It's very much so a gamble, and there's always going to be some kind of misunderstanding, because obviously, especially if there's like a different language involved, one that you are not experienced with. Like myself, I had zero experience with German, and I told my first host family that, and that created a lot of misunderstandings. And I mean, at a certain point, like, if you just don't get along with your host family, you just don't get along, and there's like not really a way you can force that kind of relationship. It's like I was talking with my German professor about it. It's like host families are really great, but the concept of it is kind of strange, because you're expected to, like, you move in with a family you've never met before. You probably talked for like 5 minutes before you even got there, and you're expected to kind of have like this certain love for them that's really not there. You already have a family at home, so of course it's gonna be harder at first. But overall, I think it's the best way to learn a language.
Everyone else is now muted.
I think it's overall a really great way to learn a language. I have no idea, like, what level of German I would be if I did not stay in a host family, or, like, go to, Austrian high school, or be literally forced into the situation. Because I could have stayed in a student dorm with other Americans, but that's not something I wanted, because my main thing was to learn German.
Yeah. And a question that I actually have for you is, what do you think that your best memories of day-to-day life with your host family were?
The best memories with my host family?
Like day-to-day, everyday living, things that you'll never forget. Definitely
just like being in the family, I would say. I mean, my family here in Chicago, we're like a family, obviously, but we're definitely more like on your own, like, everyone does their own thing. We're very independent individuals. And over, like, with my second Austrian family, they were very, like, about togetherness and, like, family. And, like, for me, that was just a huge culture shock within itself, because obviously that's not something I'm really used to. I'm used to just doing my own thing. So, like, I grew to kind of like it. Like, it was just, like, really interesting to see, like, how other families worked. And, like, I loved, like, them sharing, like, their love for their country and, like, what they want to see change, and, like, their passion for it, and how they would show me certain things about what they were proud of about Austria, and they would, like, teach me how to cook certain things, and, like my host sister and I, we would just, like, sit on the U-Bahn, like, the train, like, the subway, and she would just teach me slang words, like, Viennese, or, like, lower Austrian slang words, and, like, it was just, like, the overall experience is really nice.
Yeah, that sounds like a blast. So, we also got a question from Allie, and this kind of relates to living in a family and being in a new environment. She asks, once in Austria, how long did it take for the original homesickness to go away? And what helped you feel in your element faster? It's a great question, Allie. Anastasia, what do you think?
That is indeed a really good question, and it's definitely one that's always on someone's minds. It was on my mind at first as well. And I think it honestly depends on where you're placed. I mean, my first environment in Salzburg, I didn't really click with it, so of course I was going to always be homesick, and I didn't really have, like, too many friends there, so it was just, like, it lasted quite a while. I think it lasted, like, and, like, I was homesick for, like, 3 or 4 months. But I didn't also like my situation in Chicago either, so I was just kind of homesick for a place where I would feel comfortable. And because, I mean, exchange, you're thrown into, like, this whole new environment, like, no one knows you, you don't know them, like, there's just certain things, like, for me, it was, like, a new language, like, I felt like I couldn't communicate. I felt like I was literally mute. Like, I felt like everything I would say just come out wrong, or, like, like, I had no concept of grammar. And so it takes a while, but, like, once you find, like, your place, like, you just don't want to go back home. Like, I remember, like, I was just like, I'm not going to go back home. I'm just going to stay here. But, yeah, it depends on your mindset and what you can handle and what you can't handle.
Mm-hmm. How long do you think that took, the overall, like, to get to that point?
Maybe
4 months, you said?
Yeah, I feel like I never, like, no one ever really gets to that point, like, unless you're living there for, like, 10 or 15 years. Even then, it's, like, there's still going to be a part of you where you were born and raised, of course, because that's what you think in, that's what you associate with home. And I feel like, even at the end, I was never really homesick to begin with, because as I said before, I didn't really like my situation in Chicago either. I was just homesick for a certain place where I'd feel comfortable. But overall, I would say I, like, settled in more or less, like, 4 or 5 months.
Okay,
halfway through.
And then, like, Allie asked, too, like, what helped you feel more in your element? Like, what is the change that happened that made you feel more comfortable there?
I think, like, one thing that helped me feel more comfortable, I also had another exchange student at my school near Vienna, and she was from Wisconsin, and we were already, like, Wisconsin, Chicago, like, literally only 4 hours by car, so it just kind of, like, wow, like, it was, like, certain things, like, we could relate to each other, and, like, we both had, like, a love for Austria and a love for German, so, like, it kind of put me more at ease to have, like, another American there. It was just, like, a little bit comforting, so I feel like that helped me a little bit, not to say, like, everyone should just go and find the nearest person, like, the nearest exchange student, like, reach out to people from your host country, but for me, it helped me, because she helped me, like, settle in, like, she showed me Vienna, and, like, advice on, like, what to do for, like, public transport, and, like, that helped me a lot.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a good point, too. And so on most of our high school abroad programs, all of the exchange students meet together at the beginning of their program, and so they're not necessarily going to be placed in the same school. Like, that's probably a rare case, I would say.
Yeah, it was a rare case.
But the good thing is, like, what a lot of students do is, like, yeah, sometimes you do just want that comfort of someone who automatically understands you. That's understandable.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted that when I lived abroad, as an adult and as a student. But that's why when you meet people, like, in your orientation or at the beginning of the program, you can keep in touch with them throughout your program.
Exactly.
And share experiences, see their Facebooks, and kind of lean on each other for that support, even if they're not in your same school.
Exactly. It's just having, like, I feel like having someone there just to talk to, like, about your experience, who would, like, relate to it, is overall just, like, a huge comfort. And, like, I'm so glad I met, like, I didn't have a lot of exchange friends. I tried to keep it predominantly Austrian. But, like, my 1 or 2 exchange friends, like, I'm still friends with to this day. And, like, we met up in Austria actually a couple weeks ago. So it was really nice.
That's awesome. Yeah, I always think it's, like, a really nice balance between pushing yourself out of your comfort zone and being in those situations where you're not completely secure in your language or, you know, your friendships or whatever.
Exactly.
But then also having at least a little piece of home.
Yes.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so again, I've muted you, but go ahead and write your questions in the chat box. I still have other questions that people put in, but Allie, that was a great question. Thank you so much for asking.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and so also somebody asked, this is also a really common question, how much freedom did you have while living abroad? So sometimes people think, like, you know, just like there are tons of families here, maybe some of your friends, you who are listening, your friends' parents don't let them do anything, and then, you know, they're kind of bored, but what about you? What about in Austria? What was that like? Did you have freedom while you were living abroad?
It's hard because I was a liability, so even though I was 18 years of age, I was then again, like, on, like, more or less a youth program, like a high school abroad, so I was treated like how a 16-year-old would be treated, or someone who was not of legal age yet. So for me, it was kind of hard because I grew up, as I said, in, like, a very, like, independent family who, like, I would just go out, like, at, like, midnight, and, like, there would be no question about it. It was just, like, be safe. Like, it was just kind of, like, my parents just raised me to be, like, very, like, all right, you can go out, but, like, you know, fend for your own a little bit. I mean, I didn't grow up in, like, a wilderness or whatever, but it was just, like, I just grew up in, like, an independent household, and that kind of made me more responsible for myself. And so I was kind of used to just, like, having freedom overall and not, like, being held back by rules and restrictions. But with programs, like, especially as a teenager, you are a little held back by, like, not only your program's rules, but by your host family's rules. And it depends on, like, your host family, obviously. I mean, my first host family, there wasn't really rules, but my second host family, there was rules. And so it really depends on where you're placed. And overall, there will, like, every program you'll join, there will definitely be rules. Like, you probably can't leave the country, like, at some point without permission, or, like, like, for high school programs, you can't drink, or, like, you can't, it's just, like, certain things, you know, like, what you wouldn't do in your country, you probably shouldn't do it in your host country. That's a rule of thumb. So, if you don't, like, drink over here, you probably shouldn't drink over there, and it's just, like, it always depends on your thing. I mean, then again, like, if you are going through a high school program, you are a liability. So, like, they don't, like, if you get hurt, it's on your program. So that's why they have these rules to, like, kind of keep you safe and, like, not have you go missing in the middle of, like, Eastern Europe, or even when you're, like, doing an exchange in France. It's just, like, to keep you safe, which is good. I just kind of, like, looking back, I kind of recommend, like, if you are, like, of 18 years of age, maybe do, like, an adult program and not a high school program. Like, especially if you want more freedom, or maybe, like, study at a university in your country of choice. That's what I would recommend. But yeah, overall.
But in terms of, like, using public transportation on your own, or going to a neighboring town, did your host family allow you to do that?
In Salzburg, it was hard because I literally lived, like, right in front of the mountains on the countryside.
Oh.
So I wasn't exactly allowed to go out unless I had, like, a ride. But, like, no one lived in the countryside of my class. They all lived in, like, the inner city. But when I lived in Vienna, I was always, like, on the U-Bahn, the S-Bahn, like, the buses. Like, I know, like, the back of my hand. I'm pretty sure I know, like, the U-Bahn system better than, like, the L system in Chicago sometimes. It just depends on, like, where you're living. Like, on the countryside, it might be a little bit more difficult than if you're, like, me and, like, live 10 minutes from Vienna, and you can just hop on the train, or, like, go on the bus, or, like, have someone drive you, or even, like, ride your bike. It always depends on where you're placed.
Yeah. And then another question that we got was actually was about getting involved in, like, after school activities and making friends that way. So, like, can you talk a little bit about, like, how did you meet people, like, local Austrians? And, like, what activities did you get involved in to meet them, if you did?
Yeah, Austrians, actually, from, like, well, when I transferred to my second, I didn't really, making friends was definitely the hardest part. Like, you wouldn't think it would be the hardest part. You're like, oh, wow, I'm young and foreign. Like, everyone will want to be my friend. And you kind of walk in with, like, this kind of, like, boasty, like, mentality. Like, yeah, everyone's going to want to be my friend. But in reality, it's, like, I feel like it was a lot harder for me because, I was nervous. I was jet-lagged. I had no idea what I got myself into. I did, like, maybe, like, zero research on Austria before I left. It was just, like, I literally was just, like, in it. Like, I was there for a year. And, like, that was just, like, dealing with culture shock. And, like, also I feel like the mentality of Chicagoans are so different from, like, Austrians, like, or just Americans in general. It just, and, like, sometimes my, like, big American personality was just, like, way too much for people, and, like, they were just kind of like, oh my god. But it was just, like, and it was also, like, the second factor was my German was horrible. I literally could speak very few phrases. Like, I knew words, I knew how to somewhat get by a little bit, but besides that, it was really bad at the beginning. But then I moved to Korneuburg, so near Vienna, and it completely changed. It was interesting because I got there, like, in December, so their school year already started. So it was just, like, it was before winter break, and there, I guess, like, for school activities, it's not like in the U.S. where you can just, like, join. It's more or less you sign up at the beginning of the year, or that's what my other exchange student friend told me. Like, at that school, like, you signed up for, like, clubs at the beginning of the year, and you, like, kind of stuck with those same clubs. So it wasn't, like, I couldn't join any, like, clubs. And I don't think a lot of people did after-school clubs. That's just really not, like, a thing in Austria. I mean, people do sports, but, like, not so much clubs. So it was just more or less I was meeting people through, like, my class. That was definitely where I met the most people, was through, like, my classroom. I had, like, the bigger classroom, so it was kind of, like, to my advantage, and, like, they, like, were super nice, and, like, they only spoke German with me for the most part, unless we were at parties, and people would try to, like, impress me with their English, but that's another story. And, like, definitely through, like, your classroom will be your biggest advantage, and it's really good if you're going to a different country if you at least learn like some basic phrases and like only make a pact to speak in that language, because your first instinct's going to be that you want to speak in English. But it's kind of like here, like if a Spanish exchange student came here, like, and you took 5 years of Spanish, would you really want to speak Spanish? Do you really think your Spanish should be that great? So it's kind of like that over there. Like, just because they can speak English does not mean they will speak English with you. Because why should they? They're in their country. You should be expected to be proficient. So it always depends, but it's up to you to just kind of like, you know, make efforts to, you have to like put yourself out there literally and like force you kind of like force yourself like to like talk to people, like. And I mean, I feel like this experience has like made me more extroverted, if anything. Like I can handle like conversations a lot easier now, and like it's definitely an experience that teaches you how to be outgoing, like how to network, and like how to how to be a people person.
I can agree with that for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I felt like I had nothing to lose at any point. I'm like,
exactly.
These people aren't going to see me again. I can go back to my home country and never talk to these people again.
Exactly. You know, you're going to, like, at the beginning, you're going to be like, oh my god, like, I don't want to speak to anyone in, like, the host country's language because, like, I feel so nervous and, like, I can't speak it and I'm, like, that ignorant American. And then after, like, 3 or 4 months, you're like, whatever. Like, if they judge me, they judge me, just as long as I speak. And so that's what I did. And I just spoke, and like it improved by a landslide. And like it's kind of like I saw like this one thing, I think on like Twitter, of course, and and it was kind of like learning a new language is like downloading like a starter pack to meeting like even more friends. And that is so true. If I'd never learned German, if I'd only spoken English in Austria, I wouldn't have as many connections as I do today. And I mean, it's like a new way to like learn like what's really said, what's the slang, what like the grammar, like to hear it as much as possible, and like to like what do like people in your age group really do over there, like what are like the best parties to go to, or like what's like the best after school activities, like to try a new sport, to just like network in general.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, I can't tell who said it because it's viewer 6, but someone asked also, I think they're asking about the sign up process. So like getting everything ready to go and like the preparation process, like how was that for you?
So the preparation, I'm not gonna lie, I like was kind of like in denial that I was gonna go. I was kind of like, it didn't really hit me. Like I was just kind of like, oh yeah, like I signed up for this program, but like I'm going to Austria. Like it like didn't really click. Like I didn't decide to go to Austria because my original choice was either Amsterdam or Germany, and then I kind of like settled for Austria. But probably best like last minute decision of my life. And it, like as I said before, I was like more or less a little last minute the sign up process, but I was actually introduced to Greenheart Travel by a previous teacher of mine, and I'm really glad I decided to go with them. And they were super supportive as like through beginning till end. Like they provided me like books and like a t-shirt and like what to expect, and like if I was having a bad time in Austria, I would tell my parents, and probably like because I was too nervous to talk to my program, and then my parents would like talk to Greenheart, and then Greenheart would like if something was wrong, they would like try to fix it like right away. So they're always there for you, and throughout your whole program.
Yeah, thank you. All right, and so another question from Allie. Allie asks, is there anything you wish you had done differently while abroad? Take more photos, pack more or less, or anything else?
Definitely pack less. I packed 2 big suitcases. One was for shoes and one was for clothes.
Oh my gosh.
It was so messy. It was so bad. I regret it completely because I had to take myself to Vienna because my first host family just like, we didn't really end on a good note, but like they just like dropped me off like at my school. Like I had a full school day, and they're like, all right, well, have fun like going, like leaving. And then like I had like these 2 huge suitcases, and like I regretted it. I was like, I wish I just kind of like brought like a backpack and just like re-wore the same like 10 outfits like throughout the whole trip. But I guess my second one would be like, I wish I was more proficient in the language before, but a part of me also says I'm glad that I didn't know anything, because it was kind of cool to like see the process of like my proficiency skills as I like went through the program. Like I went from like nothing, and then I finished like being like B1, B2, which is kind of like, I don't know how to explain that. It's kind of like halfway through proficiency, or like the proficiency like academic like scale, and now I'm almost C1, which is like close to native speaker, which is really interesting because I literally went from like 0 to 100. Like it was just like, it's just really interesting to like see. I don't really regret anything about like my trip, or like things like I wish I knew, because I feel like everything happens for a reason, and like if I already knew like previous things, then like it would have ended up differently, and maybe that would have been a good thing, and maybe it would have been a bad thing. So there's just no way of knowing.
Yeah. Well, I want to ask too, like, you've already touched on this a little bit, but if there's one thing, like, so even through those difficult times, or the times that you were maybe not homesick, but just not really fulfilled in your experience, what did you learn from that most of all?
I kind of like learned like everyone goes through it, because I was I had like the privilege of being part of an exchange student page on Facebook, and like I feel like exchange is very much so hyped up, rightfully so, because it's a great experience, but like everyone's kind of like, I mean, including programs like, wow, this is like the time of your life, like you're gonna have a great time. Like I feel like a lot of like the bad stuff isn't touched, like it's not really touched on. Like I feel like a lot of like mental health stuff and, you know, like the bad parts aren't really touched on, because obviously programs don't want to market the bad stuff, they obviously want to market the good stuff, so you go on their program. But for me, just like to know, like in the secret like exchange student page, like to like see the realities of exchange and not just the benefits, it just like to know that people were going through the same thing as you was just like really interesting. And like, you know, exchange is, yeah, of course there's gonna be moments where you're like, oh my god, I never want to go home, but there's also gonna be moments where you're like, I want to go home. Like, you know, it's just the reality of it. You know, you're not always gonna be on like an adrenaline high like 24/7. There's gonna be times where like you're mellow, gonna be times where you're like really happy. It's just a whole, you're like expected to embrace a culture with only such a short period of time. Like a year is nothing. So, you know, it's I feel like just like what got me through it was just like meeting up with other people, or like just like trying to throw myself into like Austrian culture, and just like what was thrown at me, like just embracing it with open arms after a certain point.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a good point, because I mean you are on a program and you're having this experience, but it's also life.
Exactly, it's life.
Right.
It's
and life's not always awesome.
Exactly. And I feel like it was just like a lot harder, because like I had to learn like a whole new language when I like barely like know my own, like within a matter of months, and that's just impossible, because there's so many idioms and so many verbs, and like they like have masculine, feminine, neuter, like it was just insane. But I mean, I feel like it like really shaped into the person I am today, and like I'm applying for another program to go live in Germany for a year, so you know,
even though it did suck sometimes, would you do it all over again?
I don't know if I would do it all over again, because it's a really exhausting process. Like, it really takes a lot out of you. I mean, there was, like, some days where I, like, would just crash. Like, my host family would just find me on the couch, and they were like, oh, yeah, you fell asleep for, like, 6 hours. And it'd be, like, a Monday afternoon, and I was like, oh, my goodness. Like, just because you're, like, surrounded by so much. Like, and, like, my brain is just like, I have no idea what's going on. So, I don't know. I feel like I would just do like the same like culture, but like a different experience. That's why I'm applying to go live in Germany this time, just like to see like, and it was really interesting, like because I recently went back to Austria for a couple weeks, and for me it was just like I got to see it through whole new eyes, because when I was in Austria I did not really take a language course, so I didn't know how to write German. I just knew how to speak it. So I was expected to write it at some times, but yeah, that was really rough. But I got to see Austria with, like, whole new eyes, and, like, I took German lessons while I was at college, so, like, I finally got to use, like, my grammar, like, I got to, actually got to apply it in, like, real-life situations, and, like, I got to, like, look out for certain, like, vocab, and, like, it felt like, I feel like I matured a lot more, actually, when I got back than, like, while I was there. It was kind of a weird situation. I think it was also different because I am almost 20, and I went on the exchange when I was 18. It was a gap year, and so, like, I got to, like, when I got back to Chicago, I, like, kind of, like, applied, like, everything I learned from Austria and, like, applied it in Chicago, and, like, while also building, like, finding myself in Chicago and, like, going back to Austria, and just, like, I got to see it through, like, old, like, like, a newer lens, while applying, like, also, like, trying out older stuff, and, like, it was just a really interesting experience.
Yeah, I think it's important to point out, or interesting to point out, that everything you're mentioning, I feel like me, as I was an exchange student, I went through the same thing.
Exactly.
But imagine that I was in college. So I did my junior year in college, and you did yours, like, right after high school.
Yeah.
Imagine that I learned everything that you're speaking about. I learned that much later than you. So when you do this in high school, you mature fast. And you learn this a lot faster than your peers. And, like, when you go to college, you're already, like, 4 steps ahead of everyone else.
You are. You are. It's definitely... I mean, you can do exchange at any time. Like, either way, you'll, like, have, I guess, like, some kind of epiphany. Maybe not. Maybe not. I don't know. It just always depends on your mindset. Yeah, we hope so. But it always depends on your mindset. And, like, I mean, I went in with, like, looking back, I was, like, really mature. And, like, I was, like, just turned 18. Like, I was, like, very much so a child. I mean, I still am, like, a child. But, like, not really.
I felt like I was a child. I was 20.
Exactly. It just, like, looking back, I, like, realized how much my mindset shifted, like, throughout the whole year. When you're there, you don't really feel different. You just, like, kind of feel, like, you feel a little bit, you feel like something's changed, but you don't know what, you can't place a finger on it, and then once you get back, it's not even directly once you get back, you have to wait a few months, and then you realize, oh my god, like, wow. Like, you look back at, like, before you went on exchange, you're like, I feel, like, you can't even place a finger on it, you're just like, I just know everything's different. And that's why it was so hard, like, for me to click with a lot of people who I, like, called my friends. Like, a lot of them, plenty of them, like, I wasn't even asked about my gap year when I got back. I was very, like, I was expected to go back to the same thing, and I feel like that made it more difficult. That's why, like, I moved away from Oak Park. That's where I'm originally from. And I actually moved out to the burbs, which is something I would have never thought I would do. But it actually kind of, like, was its own version of, like, culture shock and, like, formed me more as a person. So I think it's kind of, like, if you do have that chance when you get back to, like, change something about your life, like, at home, it makes the experience a lot easier. Like, it makes settling back in, like, because then you're almost kind of feel like, oh, I have, like, a new start. Make the experience about reverse culture shock a lot easier.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great. Yeah, this is the real deal.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah. But also I'll mention to everybody who's listening, Greenheart Travel supports you in the reintegration as well. Mm-hmm. So we have our outreach coordinator, Kate. She gets in touch with everybody who's gone on our programs, and we have webinars for people who have gone back, and you can meet other people who are going through exactly what you're talking about, because the reintegration process really is hard. You've had a completely
life-changing experience. It's actually a lot harder than, like, the integration process. Right. So I found.
Yeah, and for sure, and we've got a great blog on our site that was just published by another intern named Michaela. It's wonderful. I really encourage you to check it out, called Reverse Culture Shock, right? And also, if the Atlas, which is what, if you're interested and if you've been getting emails from me, you should have already got. It's our exercises for before, during, and after your program. Mm-hmm. And we have a lot of post-exchange resources in there to help you work through that process.
Exactly. Yeah. It's literally a roller coaster. Like, that's the most cliche way I can put it, but it's definitely a roller coaster. But it, like, even though Austria was a totally like westernized, like, it was kind of like a little taste of East and West, and, like, politically they're different, just overall different, but, like, they're still Western. Like, it was still a huge culture shock, and, like, completely altered my mindset 100%. And I would recommend if you ever get a chance to even like go abroad, like for vacation or like for like a year or a semester. I recommend to take it because while you're there, like maybe you will feel it alter your life, maybe you won't, but when you get back, you'll have that experience that 90% of Americans won't have. You know, if you can learn another language, you're already ahead of the game and you're more employable, and you'll probably have like more opportunities to make friends when you go back or like live there. You know, just overall it's a benefiting experience.
Well, that's wonderful. We'll take maybe one more question. Otherwise we'll wrap up. So go ahead and put it in the box now, in the chat box. Last questions.
Yeah,
Anything
don't
you're done
be
with?
shy.
You know, if you have more questions after this, you're in luck. You know why? Because we're doing this again.
Woo!
Yeah, so Anastasia's going to be doing another live Q&A for us at the end of July.
Yeah.
So hold your questions for then if you have more. Otherwise, thank you so much for taking the time to be here and to be exploring the idea of high school study abroad.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was a pleasure speaking.
Thank you for sharing your experience. All right, let's give everybody at home, let's give Anastasia a round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll have a wonderful evening, everyone. Get in touch with me. I'm Allison. I'm the high school abroad and short-term programs coordinator. So get in touch with me if you have any program-specific questions or want to know about the application process. Otherwise, it was great to have you on. Have a great day.
Bye.